Hi there, welcome to the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. I love your company, thank you very much. This is episode 49 of season 7, only a few more to go for the year. We're almost done for 2025. It's just gone so quickly. I think that's one of the things that as you get older, everyone tells you the years zip past, and yeah, by God they do. Anyway, so it's time for me to reflect back on decandling. I'm coming towards the end of my decandling season. Normally it goes for a little bit longer, but due to some commitments, my time is a bit shorter, so I needed to have a race to the finish line, which is no problem. It'll be all good. It is what it is. And I'm a reflection / continuous improvement sort of person. I always like to look at how I could do better, be better. You know, what do I need to focus on? What do I need to change, or what do I need to stop doing? And I want to, every time I do something, every time I work on my trees, or any time I do absolutely anything, I want to take a step forward continuously. I always want to be going in the right direction. So I like to look back on what I've done and where I made mistakes and where I could focus on things, just so I could pass it across in the podcast. So if it's something that you're doing, hey, you're not alone. Everyone does it. Everyone makes mistakes from time to time, whether it's because you're tired or just because of poor technique or whatever it is, or maybe you just don't know. And what you don't know, you don't know. So I like to use this podcast to make it positive for all of us, where we can focus on things. So I want to spend the next little bit of episode 49 just chatting about some lessons and reminders that I've set for myself with decandling. So when I continue, or when I focus on it next time, I won't make these mistakes. Or if I do, I'll have a clear list. I'll have a review sheet that I look at before I get into it. Just say, hey, last year, remember, don't forget you talked about doing this, doing that. So hopefully it's useful for you. Decandling my black pines, or red pines, but black pines mainly for me. It's something that, I kid you not, it's something that I think about a lot, probably for the whole year, and wait for it and think about what's going to evolve next. And, that cutting off process means I'll get further division, which means that the structure of my tree will get better and my ramification will improve, and I can work on needle length and all the rest of it. It's just one of the main cogs in looking after or managing the growth cycle or development of Japanese black pines. And it comes around so quickly, and it's gone so quickly every year. But it's great. Like, I get those trees, I get to spend some time one-on-one with them, and with all my trees, with any tree, I don't overwork them. It's one of the things that I'm really adamant about, is not overworking my trees and letting get some rest and recovery time in between me doing whatever it is that I've done to them, and the next step. And the more serious the work is, the longer in between I leave them. And I don't mind when they look shaggy. I really don't. It makes me feel good because they look happy and healthy. As long as I don't let it go too far and lose structure because things get too long, because the inner areas die out, the bud conveyor dies, but all that usual stuff that I rabbit on about. But decandling is one of those things that when it gets here, it's like fantastic. It's so good. I get to actually do this part of the work on the trees, and it's the same with pinching maples or pruning back my natives when it's the right time, or repotting, or any of the tasks. I really look forward to those maintenance tasks that I have set for myself, so I can take the trees to the next level. So when I start working on the trees, I sort of have a bit of a call it a shit list, a list for myself, right? An angry list where I think, you've really got to do better, and I make this list, and then I look back on it at the end of it, and I think, all right, so you definitely improve from the first tree to the last tree. You definitely get better. When you're doing hundreds of trees with decandling, the first cut might be a bit rough, the first tree might be a bit slow, but by the end of it, you're flying through it like you've got a chainsaw in your hand and you're just tearing off the branches. But it's one of those things that even though I get faster, I get I get more thorough and I try and do things even better. Like, it's the 1%ers that make such a big difference. So I thought I'd just run through my list that I have for myself. And if you are still decandling, great, something to focus on. If you're finished, it might be something to look back on in future years, because I know a lot of people listen to different episodes of the podcast at different times. And if you are thinking about somewhere in the future, somewhere after 2025, and thinking, hey, I wouldn't mind a refresher on decandling, then I reckon that this list will be one of those things that would be nice to hear at the start before you get into working on the trees. But it's definitely something for me that I wouldn't work on a tree and then go, right, here's my list. It's like, okay, well, what could you have improved when you worked on that tree? It's like, okay, well, this is the part. This is the thing that I think really, I might have done it 4 or 5 times. Probably should be 0. So that's my target, is to make it perfect. So I'll just focus on it. I'll put it on the list. So next time I work on a tree, it might happen by mistake, but it's like, it's a focal point for me to say, let's just keep taking that step forward and improving. So I have talked about number 1 on my list before, and I reckon I've talked about it maybe 100 times more. Like, it is the most important thing for me forever. It's the health of the tree, the health check, number 1 priority. Every time I think about anything with bonsai, or doing the work, or advising someone, or anything, doing a demo, or no matter what it is, weeding the tree, I look at the tree and I think, how's the health of that tree going? Is it thriving? Is it doing the best it possibly can? Is what I'm about to do to it going to have an impact? And that's always the case. So with decandling, that process of going through and cutting off the new growth, the spring growth, and expecting the tree to back bud and develop, buds and ramification and smaller needles and shorter internodes and all the rest of it that decandling does. I think about it all the time, where sometimes I'll go through on a tree and I'll go, yeah, there's lots of strong stuff around the place. Great, yep, tick the box, health check, done. But then I'll start working on the tree and I'll go, actually, that branch there, it's probably not as strong as what it could be. And I might think, it's okay, I can decandle. And then I'll get part way into it and I'll think, no, actually, I shouldn't. I should hold off. Like, that branch there needs to be left alone. But it's too late. I've already decandled a few of the buds that are on there. Not going to be the end of the world, but what's best for the tree would have been to leave the whole thing alone. So that's my focus when I'm working on something significant like decandling, is, okay, well, not just the overall health of the tree, but break it down. Have a look. Like, is every area of the tree right to be decandled, or is it maybe something that I should only focus on the super strong areas? Is it only the apex and the top couple of branches, or maybe it's just a few different areas on the tree that need focus as opposed to the entire tree? And it makes me think, okay, so if health is an issue and I've got this opportunity where I can harness the spring growth, that spring growth is so important. It happens once a year where you get that burst. And it might be that there's a few candles around the tree. And I'm talking about black pines, but this applies to everything. The sacrifice branches that I've talked about in previous episodes, is it maybe time to look at a branch and say, well, okay, 1 or 2 of these buds have really shot off, but the rest are pretty average. They're not very strong. Is it worthwhile grabbing one of those for a 6-12-month period and saying, you know what, draw some more resources to this branch, and let's focus on getting the rest of that branch to develop a bit more strength. And then I can come back and cut that off, rather than going, I want division, I want ramification, I want shorter needles, I want this, I want. What's best for the tree? And number 1 is the health assessment of the tree, and not, like I said, not just ticking a box saying, yeah, it's nice and green, perfect, I'm going to get into it. It's at that micro, that shorter level. Number 2 on my list is to perfect the technique. You can use a pair of scissors so many different ways. You can hack through something, and or you can elegantly glide through something. You can have minimal damage, or you can have maximum damage, and still look back on the tree and go, whatever. It's still achieving the same thing. I've removed the growth. And again, this is a general guide that I use, but it's more specific, something that I knuckled down on when, I'm decandling a tree. It might be 10:30 at night or whatever it is, and I'm tired, I'm buggered, my hands are sore, I've got cramping from using tweezers and scissors and working through the tree, and that's the time when I stuff up. That's the time when I make mistakes. When I'm distracted or when I'm tired, you sort of just go, whatever, just cut. And then, you come back and look at the cuts and go, well, they're not perfectly flush. There's a bit of a stub there. There's, maybe an angle on the cut as well. That's not what I want. I want it to be perfect. I want to make sure that when I'm using my dominant hand with the tweezers, my non-dominant hand with the scissors, I want to, get in there and make the cut and do it as surgically as I possibly can. So I'm super critical of myself when I work on any tree. Doesn't matter if it's mine or someone else's. I'm super critical to say, better. And if you're new to the game, then that's slowing down, looking at the cut after you've made it. Have you sort of crushed the whatever it is that you've cut, the branch or the the candle or stem, whatever it is. Have you crushed it, or is it nice and clean? Is the tool that you're using appropriate for the job? If you're using a pair of root cutting scissors that have been through the repotting cycle a few months ago to decandle your tree, is that the best you can possibly do? Spend a few extra bucks getting a pair of scissors just for pruning and having those root pruning scissors put aside for when it's the right time to be using those. That's more appropriate. And, making sure that your tweezers are nice and long length and firmly able to grab the new spring candle so you can get in there and make the cut nice and easy. It doesn't take a lot of effort to perfect it. It takes, being sloppy with your work or being lazy or being rushed or being tired. They're the things that I really kick myself in the pants for and say, you know better. You're better off leaving it for today. There's no time. Normally, there's no time urgency to get these things finished here and now. So leaving it for the next morning, the next day, a few days later, the next weekend, whatever it is, it's not going to be the end of the world for you. But rushing it and doing the wrong thing might mean that you seriously set the tree back, or maybe you may never know the damage that you've done by making these rough cuts. The tree, might allocate more to healing the wound than pushing the new buds that you want to do. Being surgical means it's nice and clean, which means the tree's going to move on as quickly as it possibly could. The third thing, this relates specifically to decandling for me. It's when I put my scissors onto that spring candle, that new spring growth, and I push through, I get very annoyed and I'm diligent making sure that the scissor tip doesn't go too far through and cut the needles on the other side. I definitely don't want to be removing needles when I'm cutting the candles. Sometimes, hand up, this is why it's on the list. It happens. It happens to everybody. It happens to me. It happens to me far more frequently than what I would like, but it's to the point where I think about the resources that are going to be drawn to that area is based on the number of needles that are left alone. And if you're rough, if you're not precise with your technique, then you're going to be cutting needles that are on this side of the candle and that side of the candle just to remove the candle. So therefore, you might damage 1-2 pairs of needles around the bud. Doesn't sound like much, but if you think about it, let's say for ease of calculation, there's 10 pair of needles around there and you've removed 1 pair, 2 pairs. I mean, there's 10-20% less resources the needles are going to draw to that area because you've been rough with how you've processed the work, how you've removed that candle. And when you talk about it as a mathematical percentage, that's massive. That is absolutely massive. And, let's say it's just partway through the needle, the tree, maybe allocating resources to that cut needle as well. So it's one of those things that, like I said, I really try and hone in on to perfect the technique. And that's one of the things that I really work hard on to make sure that it's, I'm just doing the work that needs to be done. I'm not making any further damage. I'm just focusing on exactly what I want. So the tree, based on the calculation of, yes, it's a healthy tree. Yes, it's going to have enough resources to move forward from what I've done to it. you don't go in there and start doing extra cuts or extra damage to areas that you really shouldn't. Next section, before we have a quick break and move on, is to identify the sacrifices. I talked about them a bit earlier. It is such an important thing for me now, these short-term sacrifice branches that I run on a lot of my different trees. They're not there for 5, 10, 15 years. It's seriously, it's just a short-term thing. 3, 6 months, whatever it is, just to draw more resources around the tree, to allocate what I need. I find that they're really particularly useful if I do have a sacrifice branch on the tree for thickening of the trunk. By letting a few different areas start to move away as well, I don't necessarily need to reduce or cut the main sacrifice branch because it's drawing too many resources. I find that these short-term sacrifice branches pull resources back themselves because the tree sort of goes, okay, well, you're having a good crack. All right, so here's some more juice for you. And if it's running down the branch, then everything else around that bud tends to get a good share as well. It's not a set and forget type scenario. It is something you have to keep an eye on. Those sacrifices, the short-term ones, can do some serious damage by being let go too far. If you've got wiring on those branches, the branches will thicken quickly. So you need to keep an eye on that sort of thing. But for me, I find that it's really, really useful having those sacrifices. And once you've cut something off, you can't put it back on. This harnessing of spring resources is it's valuable. So don't cut it off if it's something that you can use. All right, let's have a break and get into the next section. Righto, this next one is one that's going to be more of a visual thing, but let's see how we go putting it into a podcast form. Do not decandle a needle bud on its first year. So a needle bud, I'll just explain what that is. So the bud starts growing from the center of your needle pair. It'll start to push and start to grow out, and it'll start to get quite long. They're lovely, they're great, they pop up randomly around the tree. Sometimes when you've purchased nursery stock, if they're not in the decandling process, you might find for a year or two after acquisition that the tree will be pushing these needle buds. Brilliant, great, nice sign of a healthy tree. They sometimes maybe start growing and then stop growing. They don't survive depending on the tree. But at this point in time, let's assume that they're nice and strong. You've got your needle which joins to, let's say, a branch, right? So the needle base is connected directly to a branch. The needle bud starts to grow from the center of the needles and starts to push out. It gets a nice green stem, gets new needles on it, and it looks for all perception like it is a normal spring candle that you can come in and just cut off. And you can. You physically can go in there and cut off because you can be, when you're decandling a tree that's got hundreds and hundreds of these spring candles, it's easy to go into that automatic process. Candle, grab, cut. Candle, grab, cut. Candle, grab, cut. But with needle buds, if you think about the process, right, when we decandle, the reason why we can decandle these pines is that there's that ring of dormant buds around the base. When it's a needle bud, those dormant buds aren't there. And even if they were, right, because they form around the base of the terminal bud. So the bud at the tip where that's growing, when it stops its growth, there'll be that ring of dormant buds. But if you think about it from a physical point of view, let's say there was buds at the base of that needle bud and you come in and decandle it. So you're at a branch where we want the 1 to 2 scenario. We want one branch to divide into two, right? So at the moment, you've got your primary branch and you've got your needle bud and you've got the new branch starting to form. So that's a 1 to 2 scenario. If you come in and you decandle that, and if by chance buds grow at the base of it, they won't, but let's say they did, then you'd have multiple buds forming on that primary branch, all growing from the same spot. So instead of a 1 to 2, we've got a 1 to many. So you're going to go through and go, well, my target is 1 to 2. So you're going to clear out and cut off all those new buds except for one anyway. So you're going to end up exactly back where you started with that needle bud growing in the first place. So For me, it's on the list because when I do get into automatic mode and I'm flicking through going, there's 3 or 4 hours of decandling in this tree alone. I don't move slowly, I move quickly, and I find that I get faster and faster and faster the more that I cut. And it's that's when I make slip ups, and I'll grab these needle buds and I'll cut them and I'll look at it and I'll go, after I've cut it, I'll just go, why did you do that? Like, the scenario, just leave it alone. Like, you let it grow, next year come in. And if it gets too long, too strong, too thick, too coarse, you know what the action is. We cut it off. But that's for autumn, winter for the tree. It's not for me to do now at decandling. It's for somewhere in the future. I don't have to worry about it. So it's definitely on the list because I want to make sure that I am focusing on 1 to 2. Pines, any tree, really, they get thick, coarse areas where more than 2 things grow at any one point. So it's a useless scenario to try and do it. You may have just removed a branch that would have been a lovely branch coming off, giving you ramification anyway. So what if there's a few extra long needles on that and the rest of the tree's got shorter needles? You can sort that out somewhere down the track. But needle buds, for that reason, like I said, visually it's easy to explain. Hopefully you get the gist of what I mean, but it's where the new spring candle, the new spring growth is coming directly from the base of a branch through the needle, and it's not worth cutting it. Anyway, move on from that. Shoot me a message if you want me to send you a picture or clarify things for you. Anyway, the next one. The process for me when I look at my pines is and it's really common, not just for me, but for everybody. Because of the bud conveyor being a primary focus, I always think how thick and how dense, how little sunlight gets into those inner areas of trees. And when you look at a pine that needs decandling, the spring growth that's shot out now, like the trees have been well fed. The candles have pushed out. Some are huge, some are long. There's just needles everywhere. It's hard to see the forest for the trees when you're looking at a pine that needs to be decandled. So I get cross at myself when my focus deviates from the job. I try and put the horse blinkers on. I try and stay super focused and say to myself, you are just about decandling. Step 1 is decandling. So I made myself a big list and I've written it on my whiteboard a couple of times. It says, cut, then pluck, then thin. Don't do it in any other order. Don't look at thinning before you've done the other 2 processes, and don't look to pluck before you've been and decandled. You don't know what needle mass is there. Look, if you've done the work properly on your pines back in autumn, winter, when you've needle plucked, bud selected, and you've wired and shaped and made them very pretty, and they look great, the decandling process should take you back to that point, because what you're doing is you're removing all of the spring growth. So you are effectively winding the clock back, give or take a few shaggy needles here and there, but you are effectively winding the clock back to a point in time when the tree should have looked very nice. If it's a newer tree and maybe the work wasn't done in winter, then yeah, sure, you need to needle pluck because you need to get that set of scales balanced out where the strong areas, are a little bit lighter on needles and the weaker areas have a few more needles. Otherwise, the strong continues to get stronger, the weak gets weaker, and that set of scales is just, out of balance for another 6 months before the tree comes back onto the bench and you start doing the autumn-winter work post-decandling. But cut, then pluck, then thin. So thinning is the last job. I don't look at an area and say, gee, that's too dense, or I'll start thinning it first. Then I'm going to go through and decandle, and then I'm going to pluck, because you might go, well, actually, I've removed far more than what I should have. It might have got way too thin. So the majority of growth, visible growth, that you'll see right now, or that you would have seen with decandling, is the new spring growth. Get rid of that. Get rid of the stuff that's not going to be there anyway. Then start looking and going, okay, before I start cutting off branches and thinning this thing out, okay, do I need to pluck some needles back? Are there too many needles? Did I not balance this tree out when I worked on it last? Maybe you hadn't worked on it. Maybe you'd rushed it. Whatever. A fresh set of eyes allows you to look at it and go, all right, now pluck. And once you've plucked, then make the decision. All right, are there any branches I need to remove? You can wire at this time of year. You definitely can. You can shape. You can style it, make it look really nice. may not be always my go-to. For now, it's that pluck, cut, thin, but make sure that it's done in that order. It's really, I'm strict on myself with that. I don't let myself get carried away with what the tree looks like now, because I know that when autumn, winter gets here and I've got all those new buds and my ramification, my growth has doubled because I've removed one and I want to get 2 extra ones growing in that area. My tree is going to be so much fuller, so much nicer in a 6 months period that my focus isn't right now. It's like, do the maintenance now. So then next time I work on it, it's the far superior tree. It's it's on the way to becoming the best bonsai in the world because I've done the right work on it now. Don't rush that process. Take your time. Let it get there. Let it get there naturally, and let the tree progress as it should. Next one I wrote for myself, and this is one that definitely happens when I get tired. Let the tweezers do the work. So a technique that I was taught when I was over in Japan was to have the tweezers in my dominant hand and the scissors in my non-dominant hand, which feels so uncomfortable, so awkward. I've taught it for so many years now, and it's the same for everybody. It was the same for me. It feels clumsy. It feels really, I'm just going to swap back and put my tweezers in the left hand. But if you follow this simple guideline, let the tweezers do the work, then all your non-dominant hand has to do is open and close. It just has to hold those scissors square, let the tweezers grab the candles which grow at all funny angles, straighten it up, slide the scissors in, cut it off, flick it out with your dominant hand so the candle that you've just cut off is out of the way. I use that technique when I'm working on junipers. I work any tree that requires my hands to stay back from the foliage for whatever reason, then I will use the tweezers in my dominant hand and my scissors in my non-dominant hand, and it works absolutely beautifully. But it's like anything. It's like riding a bike. It's like whatever. You just need to make sure that you have got the technique down pat. It's kicking a football. It's playing cricket. It's whatever it is. You need to make sure that you are well and truly focused on the technique and getting that spot on. And I find that if when I was doing it the other way, before I was shown this technique, before I learned the technique, my scissors hand, my dominant hand, would be so sore. Like I'd be using my tweezers in my non-dominant hand. Same thing. I didn't want to damage the needles, so I'd use the tweezers. But as I'd reach in with the tweezers, I found that my non-dominant hand wasn't smart enough to manipulate the candle. So I found that I was constantly twisting my dominant hand, my right hand, to get the scissors on the right angle. So I did a flush cut, like a square cut on the spring candle, and you end up with cramps and it's horrible. Whereas the technique now is my dominant hand having the tweezers, I can just grab that candle, manipulate it, twist it however I want, then just slide the scissors in, bang, and it's easy. And then flick out the candle as well, and just keep moving on. So I write it on my board, let the tweezers do the work. If I find myself where my hands get very sore and they start to cramp up, it's like, all right, just have a rest. Just think about it. What have you done? If you're cutting 10 candles on a tree, it probably doesn't, it's not going to make a difference. It really won't. But somewhere in the future, that tree will have hundreds of candles. Based on the 1 to 2, 10 becomes 20, 20 becomes 40, 40, 80, whatever. So years in the future, your decandling will go from like a 3-minute job, and you can't wonder, you'll be wondering, listening to this podcast now going, well, I wonder why he's talking about it so much. It's because it's been on the table for 3 weeks. It's because that's all I've been doing for 3 weeks is decandling pines. And it's something that over that period of time, I focus on, like any time I do any sort of work, whether I'm, when I'm root pruning, like how do I get this better? How do I do it? How do I improve my technique? How do I take a step forward so next time I do it, or how do I stop making mistakes? Or how do I stop having it where every time I finish work at night, my hands are killing me? And it's simply by little things, the 1%ers, let the tweezers do the work. Get in there, grab them. And I find that rotation with the tweezers is far easier than trying to do it with a pair of scissors in your hand that are a lot bigger and a lot chunkier, and they certainly do a lot more damage on the way in and the way out. So, anyway, that's the second last one. So the last one, the very last one that I've got on my list. I'm sure there could be a million others, but these were ones that I found were super important. The last one, and this applies to every single time you're working on your bonsai or any trees in your collection, whatever it is. Make sure that your tools are clean and sharp. Clean and sharp. There's absolutely no excuse in the world for having dirty tools that have got sap built up on them, rust, dirt, whatever it's just filthy. There's no excuse for having tools that aren't clean, and there's no excuse for not having sharp tools. You should be sharpening your tools on an absolutely regular basis. And for me, just give you an example. If I've got, let's say I'm decandling in a day 10 trees, I'll more than likely sharpen my scissors. I'll clean them and sharpen them at least 20 times. At least 20 times throughout the day. And the sharpening isn't one of those major things. It's not something that I get out the whetstone and I'll sit there and I'll grind away for hours on it, making sure that they're absolutely perfect. Sure, that's for somewhere in the future when I can take my foot off the gas and sit down and put on music and maybe have a beer and get in and do it. No worries, that's easy, stress-free. But when I'm working on my tools, I want to put on a very sharp blade very, very quickly, not stuff around with it. Make sure that when I do those cuts, I'm doing them with absolutely perfect technique, and I'm doing everything to the best of my ability, and I'm making sure that I'm not going to set the tree back because I'm lazy or because I just can't be bothered or I just want to get the job done. If that's your mindset, if you look at your tools right now, or when you're working on the trees next time, before you make a cut, have a look at whatever tool it is. Is it clean? If it's a saw, like is the saw clean? Is it going to be as efficient, or is it going to chunk its way through that tree? Your scissors for repotting, are they sharp blade? Have they got chinks in them from the rocks that you've been cutting through, the scoria you've been working through? Whatever it is, just make sure there is absolutely zero excuse for not having sharp tools. Use whatever you have to use. Use rust cleaning tool. Use camellia oil. Use eucalyptus oil. It makes no difference. For me, I always look at whatever's easiest and whatever's cleanest, because if I can do something in 10 seconds, I know that I will do it. And cleaning my scissors is literally a 10-second job, because if I get a bit of a build-up, I'll feel them getting a bit sticky. I'll find the cuts are sort of crunching through a little bit more than the blades just don't go through quite as nicely. Stop, give them a quick clean, 10, 20 seconds, no problem. Get the sharpening stone out, give it a quick go. Yep, another 10, 20 seconds. Right. Within a minute, I'm back on working on the tree. I feel the cuts go through nice and cleanly. Great. When I feel them start to get sticky, the last thing I do is look at the tree and think, geez, I wonder how much work I've got left to do if I could just finish the tree first. It's like, nah, stop. Even if it's only, 10 more candles left on the tree. Make it that those 10 candles get cut perfectly. Don't rush it through to the tree goes, oh, right, okay. It's the little things. Bonsai is all about the detail. It's all about us doing the best we possibly can. So, anyway, that's my I love a list. That's my list for self-improvement and lessons I learned from decandling this year, and just gentle reminders to myself to, these things aren't new. They've been on my list for year on year on year. I still kick myself every now and then when I do make the mistake, so I try not to do it ever. And when I do, it's like, okay, go back, stop, think. Don't cut those needles off. Don't be rough with the tree. Make sure that your scissors are nice and clean. If it's not so weak, don't rush the process. Rushing decandling a weak tree is going to mean that, no, you're not going to take that step forward with the tree. It's not miraculously going to, have a very weak area cut back and then suddenly go, oh, you know what, that's been cut off. Now I'll get stronger. It's like, okay, now I've got to let that part die because I've got nothing left. Like I don't have enough in the tank to produce the buds that you're asking me to produce. So let's just take a big step backwards and, look at the tree, do the right thing by the tree, do the right thing by yourself as well, because, the trees are going to be with you for a very long time. But anyway, that's the gentle reminders I gave myself this year. Well, that's it, folks. As we do get to wrap up the year, obviously I'll have my yearly wrap up somewhere in the next couple of episodes of the podcast. But it's definitely, when you finish major tasks, it is nice to do that bit of reflection on how well you've done. Look at the trees, walk around, look at the cuts you've made. Is everything looking like it's healing quite nicely? Could it have been better? Was there little stubs left? Don't go through and muck around with reworking the trees, but it's definitely nice to sit back and have a look and say, how could I improve things? And it's not from I'm not talking about getting a whip out and flogging yourself or anything like that, but it is nice to look back, because becoming very efficient and technical with how you look after your trees and getting the techniques spot on, it takes time and practice. And like I said, I accept that this only comes around once a year. And by the time next year happens, it'd be like dusting off cobwebs off an old book going, what was that again? Hence the reason for the historical podcast. You can go back and listen to me talk for the last 7 years on Decandling about this time, because it is one of those things that refreshers are needed. It is something that you're not going to do a hell of a lot. I don't think everyone listening to the podcast will have hundreds and hundreds of black pines. You might only have one or two. Hopefully you got a lot more, because they are a magnificent species. But it is one of those things that whenever you do any task, look back on how it's responded. Could you have done things better? Your natives, when you're working on them, your plum trees, did they flower? They didn't. Okay, well, what do you need to do for next time? What about your maples? How did the pinching go? If you've defoliated, what's happened after defoliation? Is there a way that you could have done it better? It doesn't hurt. And please, like I said, don't go riding yourself into the ground. Just put it into the learning box for next year or next time that you do the process, and make sure that you keep taking those steps forward. So anyway, thank you for the support of the podcast. I truly love you all. I love the feedback. I love the interaction, and I love the bonsai community. We are all the same. We are one. It's fantastic. So thank you for listening in. Enjoy your trees. Have that positive self-reflection, and until next time, as always, happy bonsai.